Hello everybody and welcome back to the roughness portion of this tutorial. I hope you've had fun with the height and color so far. So for this one, we're going to be working on roughness. We're going to be doing a wet variant, continuing from the dripping effects and the color from the last episode. And if we look here, the snow will also have like a little bit of a sparkle. It's hard to tell when it's a fixed angle. But if we were to pan the light source, you would see the twinkling, the sprinkling. Anyway, you'll see some roughness. It's just like you would see with snow. And then we'll have our base roughness here for our normal bricks, or what I call dry bricks. There is a little bit of contrast here in the roughness, but it's very hard to tell at this specific angle. But you can see a little bit from this light coming over here on the side. But because it's all rough, it's all dry, it's going to be pretty much uniform. So let's hop right into it. Alright, so we're back in Substance Designer. I think where we left off, we had this uniform color attached to the roughness. So I'm just going to plug this back in. And we'll swing back to the beginning. I've disabled all the nodes, so we'll, as usual, go down through. And this episode should be a little bit faster. It's pretty straightforward. Alright, so right off the bat, we start with a boolean, because we will have a wet and a dry version, and the snow is based off of the dry. So right off the bat, we have two uniform colors, and one is for wet and one is for dry. And obviously the brighter one means it's rougher, so it's dry, and then the darker means it's more glossy or wet. So this one set at 0.3 grayscale will go into true, and then this one at 0.6 will go into false, and then we're using the wet boolean here. Then after that, so right now I have it set to dry, so wet is false, so that means it's the opposite, so dry. So I know this looks kind of moist, but it is just a starting roughness for dry. Then here we add some variation to our bricks, so some of them are more wet than others, or less dry than others, just to have a little bit of contrast between the bricks. We don't want them all being the same. So we have our flood field random grayscale distance diversion, so this guy, and then I clamp it a little bit, almost not even noticeable. What I basically do is I'm raising the dark ones, because I don't want them to be that dark. So I'm just raising some of those values. You can also do this with the levels node, and then I invert it, because I think this is what I used for the height variation. So my thinking here is that the lower ones are rougher because they're closer to, or because they're further into the wall, they're collecting more dirt and dust, so they will be rougher. So I invert that, and then I plug that in the foreground, and then we do a multiply. And then we just go from this, where they're all uniform, to this, having some differences between them. And this would be applied to both wet and dry. Alright, so then here we add our first layer. Let me turn this back on with it. So then here is where we start adding some detail. So if we turn it off and on, you can see that we're breaking up some of that lower roughness values. So like right here's a little bit shiny. And then beforehand, it's all kind of shiny. And then we start breaking that up to have more interesting contrast. So we pull from this guy into a copy. And then we have a uniform color here, downscaled to -7, -7. If you're doing 4K, you can probably change this to -8, just to save on some memory, or I guess computing speed. And then that uniform color is going into the foreground at 0.7, and then we need a levels node, and this is coming from this guy in the beginning, from the AO brick only. Because right now we're just worried about the roughness on the bricks. Then we'll worry about the mortar and then the lichen. So we're taking this AO. And then I think here we're actually, yeah, I hit the invert here. So this is what it would look like default. And then I hit this to invert it. Instead of having to do like a invert grayscale, we can just do it in the levels. And then I left everything else the same. And then that feeds into opacity. Sometimes I'll just have a stock levels node that's just kind of there as a placeholder, so it doesn't look like this. And it kind of looks a little neater by having this here. So that goes into opacity. And then this is the dry version. So this will go into false because it's not wet. And then this guy, the one we just did, will go into true. Then we have this detail here. With, I think I'm just pulling from this guy. So this is from the brick surface dark spots. So I'm just taking this dark spots mask into a levels, default levels. We have a uniform color of 7.75, and then we kind of just slap that on top just to kind of break up that roughness, just like we did earlier. Then another similar thing here, just a different mask. We're taking this auto levels from the brick color spotting into another stock levels here, and then we're using 0.75. And this is where you would, if you want to change the values of the roughness, this is where you would do it. Just play around with this guy. You can see the difference there. If you want some like more wet, some wet like spots into a copy here. All right, and then we do this one more time with a different one. And this is coming from, actually, I think looking back, I should probably pull from this guy because there's more of a gradient. There's more grayscale to play with here than here because I turned the contrast up. So you can see here, it's kind of just completely flat. So I think we're better off pulling from this guy. Now, the difference is probably like negligible. But, like I said, it's all about the details. Make sure that's lined up. Okay, sweet. So again, this is just another stock, just as a placeholder. 0.75 again, uniform color, into a copy. Then here, I think this is the mortar. So that's pretty much it for brick. Pretty simple. So for here, oh wait, no, I don't think this is mortar yet. No. So we're taking from the AO brick only over at the brick crevice coloring into the invert. I think I forgot to delete this guy. So we're pulling from that invert grayscale into a default levels with a 0.9 uniform color. And let me just, I think what I'm trying to do here, if we look at the mask, yeah, so where it's white is where we're going to get some roughness. So it's these little tiny details here. So this is the dry version because it's the brighter values, the rougher. So that'll go with dry. So that's going into false. And then before we do any of this, whatever was before that, so this guy is going into true. And let's see how wet is looking so far. Yep, that's looking kind of wet. And I'm not going for full on wet. I'm going for like wet slash like moist. Kind of like in a dark dungeon or something. Alright, so let's go back to dry. What's this? Oh, this is the scratches. So you can see the difference here. I just kind of highlight the scratches to make them pop more. So for that, we pull from the scratches color area in base color, and we take from the levels here. Feed that into another levels, placeholder level, into a copy. And then here I have two, again, one for wet and one for dry. So instead of putting my wet boolean like over here, I can do it this way. Just keep it a little cleaner. So we have this guy who's the wet, who's at 0.65, and then the dry here at 0.9. So then the brighter one, or the dry one, goes into false, and this darker one goes into true. We're using the wet boolean. That goes into foreground. And then if we go to wet, you can see the difference here. So a little different. Okay, so let's turn wet back off. Okay, so here's the mortar roughness. It's kind of hard to tell, isn't it? Here's a big chunk of it. Okay, it's very, very hard to see, but it's there. Yeah, you can kind of see it flickering. Yeah, we just accidentally got kind of close to it here. So when we put the mask on top, it's kind of hardly noticeable. So again, we'll have 2. So for the wet one, we're doing 0.6. For the dry 1.8. Into our wet boolean, into the foreground. And then here we're just taking our mortar mask and plug that into the opacity. Pretty straightforward. Now here's where we start detailing. It's so hard to see. It is working, right? Let me check. This is the end result. Here, let's go crazy just to make sure it's working. Oh, forgot to label this. Okay, so let's just turn this down all the way. Okay, yeah, it is working. Just very, very, very subtle. So again, for the wet, 0.5. For the dry, 0.925. Feed that into the wet boolean. And then for the opacity, we're pulling from the histogram scan from the secondary mortar color. And I think this is just the default levels. Yep. Okay, I think we're pretty much, yeah, we're getting close to the end already. Keep it short and sweet. Same thing. Here's the wet one, 0.725, and then for the dry, 0.925. Wet boolean. Then for the mask, we're pulling from the tertiary mortar color. So this guy. And we are inverting him. And then we're getting rid of the bricks. Then we're scanning. Actually, this is not doing anything. You can tell because it's at 0.5. If you have a histogram scan, it's at 0.5 and the contrast is 0. You're basically just, that's like the default of whatever is coming from before. So I think I was probably playing around with some things here. But we don't need this technically. Alright, so from that multiplication blend, that goes into the opacity. Let's see how wet's looking so far. Not looking wet enough yet. I think this is when we start getting the actual wet stuff for the mortar. Alright, so what's this? Why is the roughness so hard to see? Oh, I think it's because that these things aren't on. So I'm trying again. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So let's start back over here. So right now we're trying to blend the roughnesses between the mortar and the bricks, so it's not so sudden. So we have a uniform color all the way up to 1. We have a levels here coming from the blend just before the mortar color blend. So again, this is the roughness blend. Copy just those two together. Now here, this is the wet version, which looking back, I could have done the color thing like I've been doing here. I could have done this here so it doesn't look like this, but we'll just leave this as is. If you can, you should be able to sort it out yourself to make this look like this. But we'll just keep this way. Okay, so then this is the dry blend. And then this one's the wet one. So you want to skip this guy because this is if it's dry. So the wet version is going up to here. And then we're using 0.4. And then we're using the same levels here, which is still a default levels. And then since this is the wet one, that's going to go into true. And since this one's the dry one, this one's going to go into false. So then if we go back to wet, the difference in wet is not as noticeable as the difference in dry. Alright, so let's move on to this guy. What's this guy doing? Oh, I think this is our dust. Yeah, so we're going to pull from our dust color. So this guy here into the levels. And then if you can see here it's getting a little rougher on top. We just have a uniform color set to 1, copy, boom, boom, boom. And then since this is dry, this is going to go into false. And then this is going to be without the dust because the dust is not going to be in the wet. That's going to go into true. So if we turn this to, you'll see this disappear. Okay. Now this is pretty much, actually it's a little bit more. Alright, so let's take this part slow. So just adding a little bit more detail here. Nothing too crazy. So let's start with the final AO portal into an invert grayscale, into a scan. So right now I'm trying to get the crevices. So if we look, let's go top down. Okay, let's say like right here. Where's this? So we got these 3 bricks. That's right here. So yeah, so we're trying to take this crevice like here, right here. So this guy. And we're trying to darken that area because those are the deepest pits. So that's what this AO is giving us. And then here we have to multiply out the mortar. So we do a multiply. We take the mortar mask. And then we blur it a little bit so it's not so sudden. Then we multiply that out. Yeah, because right here it's also taking in some of the brick shadowing, which we don't want, so we want to get rid of that. But we also don't want to have a steep drop off, so we blur the mask. Then we multiply, and then we use that as the opacity with a uniform color of 1. And it's, again, it's just very subtle, but it's adding some more finer roughness detailing. Then we do this again. Final AO portal into an invert. Now this is for the wet. So since this is dry and this is wet, we're going to pull from here. Plug that in here. And then we have a uniform here of 0. And then the invert grayscale is just going to go in there. And then we need to turn these on. Okay, yeah. Because this is what's determining whether it's happening, if it's wet or not. If we don't have this, enabled, then it is not gatekeeping anything. It's just kind of going down the path. All right, so we've done these guys. So now we're over here. So you can see here that this is for the wet. If you ever see like a uniform this dark, it's probably for the wet version. So I want the holes and the pits and like these little like sponge-like holes to be wet, 'cause that's where, you know, water would hold on to. But because this is a wall texture, I don't want it to be everywhere. So this is like covering the entire like hole, and obviously it would be dripping down, so it would like kind of cut off halfway, right? It would just get stuck like over here. So we have to make sure that when we're getting over here, we kind of reduce some of that top portion because it's kind of dripping down, right? So to do that effect, we're just going to be using our what's it called? Our mask light up mask. So we'll start with an AO brick only here because this is only for the bricks. Into a histogram scan to tighten up the holes because this is giving us a lot of detail. Then we subtract the mortar mask because we're not touching the mortar right now. And then we're taking our mask light up, and then we're scanning it, and then we're multiplying. Sorry, not subtracting. So then this is like, if this was a floor texture, this would be fine because then the water would fill the entire hole. But because it's supposed to be dripping, because it's a wall, we want to get rid of some of it. You can probably go a little bit more, but I'll leave that for you guys, and that would be done like over here with the position. But I'll just go back to what I had. All right, then we copy that, and then this is a 0, and then that's going to go into wet. And then for dry, it's going to be this guy, because this one was for dry, and then these two are for wet. So now if we turn on wet, oops, it's hard to tell, but it is glossier in those holes and pits and stuff. Let me see if we can. Yeah, I caught these guys over here. Again, minor details, but they're what you need to push your material to the next level. It's all about the small details. All right, and then we're pretty much on to the lichen, and then that's it. So let's go back to dry. And then let's turn on our lichen, so you can see the difference here. So we'll have two versions of lichen, you know, one for wet and one for dry. For wet, 0.5. For dry, 0.9 into our wet boolean. Then we have our lichen roughness blend here. Set the copy. We just take our lichen mask, and then I kind of tighten it up a little bit, 0.9 and 0.25 on the contrast. Feed that in. So here it almost seems like we have no lichen, and then boom, lichen. Actually, I'm going to switch this down to like 0.8 because I want to get some of these grayscale values back. I don't want it to be flat like this or so flat like that. All right. Now this stuff is for, this stuff is for the dripping effect stuff. So this is it for lichen. Then we have a copy blend with a 0.25 uniform, and then we have our mask drip mask. So this guy. Default levels, feed them together. Then we have this. Actually, let me turn this on. Yeah, so we won't see it anymore because we have it turned off. So let's turn on wet. Now here we can see the difference that this is making. You can see it right here. Okay, and then we have this guy. That what I'm doing here is I'm taking the AO mortar. Yeah, so I'm taking the same thing we did here with the bricks, with like the pitting on the bricks. We wanted them to be wet. We're doing the same thing here. If we look at our height mask, we want these spots right here to be wet or extra wet. So you can see that's what's happening here, because that's where the moisture or the water would accumulate. So where do I start here? Okay, ignore this guy, but that's just leading ahead. So we just want to worry about this stuff here. So from that levels, from the mask, the drip mask, into a multiply, set to 0.4. And we're taking our AO brick only here. And then that's feeding into a histogram scan. And then we're multiplying that with the drip mask. And then let's go down here. We have our AO for mortar only. For this, and then we're scanning. Then I'm blurring it a little bit. Those have your quality up, even though I don't know what it does. It doesn't seem to do much. But everybody always has it on, so. Then we have a multiply, and we're multiplying with this levels here. So if you follow here, just goes down here into this blend, and then we're taking this multiply, the 0.4 multiply, and this new blend, and we're adding. And that's feeding into the opacity with a uniform color of 0.075. And then we do another pass on the pitting here. And then we use the light up mask again. We scan it. We blur it a little bit because I don't want the water to be like super, what's the word, like sharp. So I want to blur it a little bit to give the, you know, the water wetness a little bit of a fall off. So then here we scan again. Then we take that 0.1325 uniform color into this copy. See what this will look like without this. Okay, I see the difference. Okay, so then everything we just did goes into true, and then what goes into false is skipping these two guys, or these three guys, because these three are all for wet. So we wanted everything before that, for those three, goes down here and into false. Then this is the snow. So that's pretty much it for the wetness, or the wet version. And now let's turn it off. That's the dry. And then let's turn on snow. And let's turn on this guy. What's this guy doing? Oh, we gotta turn this guy on too. So you can see a little bit of the difference here. So from after the boolean here is going to feed into the background. Then we have a uniform of 1. We're going to take our snow mask and just plug that directly in there. And we're just making the snow super rough. And then we're going to add our sparkles. So this is just making the snow really rough. Then you can see here we're adding all these like dark pixels. And if you look over here at this snow, and I move the directional light, you can see a little bit of sparkling there. So that's what we're going to do now. So no sparkles, no sparkles, sparkles, no sparkles. So to do that, I used our white noise fast mask, and then I scanned it to get rid of a lot of them and just make them tiny. Now you could probably also hear the heck did I spell? Blur them a tiny little bit. I'll go with like 0.25, just to kind of give them a little bit of a rounder shape, even though it's a square. And let's see what that would look like. We would lose a lot of it, so we'd probably, we'd probably need a auto levels. So if we were to turn these off, this is what it looked like before and after. And after the other levels, we'd probably need a I wonder which one looks better. Well, if you like this new one, which I kind of just threw together, this is the setup. We just blur it a little bit, then we auto level it, and then I just increase the whites by moving the level in mid. But I'm gonna undo this, so you can leave it if you like it, or we can just go back to the normal way, which is just the scan. But whether if you keep this or not, that just feeds into the foreground, and then for the background, we're using that snow mask to get rid of the ones that shouldn't be, because this is just giving us basically sparkling snow everywhere. So it would look like that. It would be on the brick as well, but we don't want that. We only want that where the snow is. So we're using the snow mask here, and we're multiplying out the, where snow is not. So that way it stays within wherever snow is. And then we feed that in the opacity with a uniform color of 0 to get the sparkle. And then that goes into true for our snow boolean. And then if it's not true, then it's going to be after this wet, because both of these are for snow. And then after that, you don't really need this because we're not using this anywhere else. But I just put a final roughness just because I needed to use it anywhere else. Plug that in the roughness, and that's pretty much it. So we went from this to that, which is not much in the dry version. But if we go to wet and turn off snow, now you can have snow as well as can you? No, I don't think you can have both of them on. Or I guess you can. Yeah, because it is doing that. Okay, so I guess you can have them both on. But yeah, you'll see the most roughness difference in the wet, obviously. Oh, and then I've had to probably show this as we went on, but since we used the masks from our base color, then missing bricks will also get, the wet there. And like we did in the previous episode, wherever there's bricks missing, the dripping effect goes further down. All right. Well, that's it for roughness, and that wraps up our stone wall tutorial. Again, sorry for the gap. I'm starting a new job tomorrow, but I will still be working on tutorials and stuff for you guys. And I'll pick up the pace once I get settled into the new job and stuff. But I am working on another one already. It's a little more like beginner level friendly and more simple, because this one was pretty long, and I think probably my most advanced tutorial so far. So I wanted to give you guys something short, sweet, and kind of cool next. But thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys learned something new, and I'll see you guys on the next one.